secularism is always a benefit to minorities. When we're talking
Mhm.
about societies that have, and the Middle East has always historically, if we're talking about the religious demographics and the ethnic demographics of the Middle East, it's always been very diverse. And there have been different periods of persecution and discrimination, and different groups coming to power, but it still always has been very diverse. It's the extremism that we see. This is sort of, it comes out of you know grand geopolitical chess games. It's the colonialism playbook. And usually, of course, the biggest culprit to point at in that is Europe, like England and France. But Iran is taking a page out of the European colonialism playbook. And the playbook is, you find a minority demographic and you make them your clients, and
Mhm.
they're the ones that you're going to give them benefits and support them if they help you control what you want in that country. This is what the French did with the Maronite Christians in Lebanon, which
Mhm.
started the civil war between the Druze and the Maronite Christians in Lebanon in the 1840s. This is what this is what the British you know did everywhere. This is what you do is you find a minority and be like, you're the special ones. We're going to put you in power and defend you with our military might if you help us control this country, because we need somebody who's there who like knows the lay of the land and speaks the language. This is what the Iranians are doing in Syria. you know
Well, and here's the other thing. I think that you bring up very good points, and one of the things that we're seeing a lot of in Syria, in Iraq, uh, primarily in those two countries, but it's a general theme that I'm picking up on, and you see it you've seen it since colonialism in that region began, but a concerted effort to, as you put it, to support minorities, but the idea is that Sunni Muslims have to be reined in, right? And that Sunni Islam is the biggest threat to the West. And that if you want to control from that region, and if you want to control that region, you have to be able to dominate the Sunni Muslims, which
which,
means that, yeah,
which are
they'll
the
be
the majority.
which are
Which
the
is the
majority.
majority.
They form the majorities in many of those countries, and so the thing is, when we talk about ethnic strife or religious strife in um, in the Middle East, but we also see this in other parts of the world too when it comes to Muslims, is that there is this focus on, all right, let's take care of the minorities. So there's a tiny minority that exists in Syria and Iraq. They're called the Yazidis, that people had never, so like most people who are not from those places, from Syria or Iraq, had never heard of the Yazidis before, right? They're a tiny minority, and at one point ISIS had controlled their territory, right?
Yeah.
And then they were slaughtering them, they were enslaving their women. It was terrible. And so the United States decided, we're going to go in, send in our military and defend the Yazidis, because these are the what's happening to the Yazidis is just tragic, right?
Yeah,
And
it was
it is
genocidal.
tragic. It was genocidal, right? But we can count millions of Sunni Muslims who've been killed in Syria and in Iraq over the years, and that doesn't matter. It's like that no one pays any regard to that because we
They
don't
just
care.
become
One,
numbers.
they become numbers. One, two, it's part of the campaign, the global campaign to rein in Western driven campaign to rein in Sunni Muslims, right? And um, you can transfer that to just Muslims in general across different parts of the world, whether we're talking about Muslims in India, in Kashmir, in China, in yeah, Myanmar. The list goes on and on. And so uh, you think to yourself, so much conflict has happened and continues to happen where Muslims live, but primarily where Sunni Muslims live. And I believe that a big part of why Iran was given the space to operate in Syria and in Iraq for the most part. I mean, one of the main reasons is that Iran is a Shia power, right? So it's like, all right, yes, we don't like Iran. The West doesn't care for Iran, but it's like, all right, if you can turn the Shias against the Sunnis and get that conflict going, and stir up old hatreds and rivalries, man, like you've won. You've won. And so what? Let the Shias rule all the different areas of the Middle East. And even if those countries fall apart, which they are, a lot of the areas that Iran controls have fallen apart economically. They're like, all right, great. That's no problem for us. Who cares? But the sad reality is that that is what breeds radicalism. That is what breeds terrorism. Those are the environments in which radicalized groups form. And we've talked
Well,
about this, the
but
lack
I
of
mean,
economic opportunities and poverty. That's terrible. That is what breeds problems. And we can get into some of the more, like, some
yeah.
more details that I want to talk about when it comes to Syria's current status. But yeah,
No, I
go
mean, I
ahead.
think
You were going to say something.
something you're talking about. I mean, and this is, a large part of radicalization of the Muslim world is that there is a perception among a large population of Muslims that there's a concerted effort to destroy their culture and destroy their
Mhm.
religion, and that they are the enemy, and so it causes radicalization. And I mean, in some ways, there's the rest of the world isn't giving them reason to not think that way, because it really does seem like
You've
Muslim
genocides
countries are
going on,
being
man.
attacked. But see, this is part of the general like world order, since the time of like the British Empire, um that you sort of divide and conquer between ethnic and demographics and religious demographics. I mean, this is what the same thing that happened in Rwanda. The Rwandan genocide was because they put the minority group in charge of the country, um, and the majority of the population was resentful. But that's part of how you invade a country, is you find a minority group that feels, maybe that they don't have access to power, and they've been like, oppressed, and then you suddenly put them in charge. And so now
Yeah.
their loyalty is not to the population of the country. Their loyalty is to their outside sponsors. And that's
Mhm.
how get them to control the country for you. And I do think, like, Iran is taking a page out of that playbook.